This is Urban Health Today, and I'm speaking with Dr. Adrelia Allen, Executive Director of Clinical Trial Patient Diversity at Merck. She's here to talk about the urgent push for diverse research participation. Thanks for talking with me today, Dr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Tamara, for having me.
It's great to have you here. All right, let's get started. Please talk about your background and your work with Merck.
Yes, currently I'm the Executive Director of Clinical Trial Patient Diversity, where my focus is on driving change in clinical trial recruitment to ensure that our clinical research is reflective of the patient populations that we serve, in addition to imaging or reflecting those patients that are impacted by the disease. I've been working in healthcare for nearly 30 years. I'm a pharmacist by education, and as a pharmacist, I was really interested in how new drugs were studied and in the lab and in patients, and then how they, really made it to the market and available in our pharmacies. And so along the way, I've had different roles in clinical research that has really kind of helped me have a wider scope of clinical research in coming in through sales and also working as a clinical research administrator, where I'm working with clinical research sites as they're conducting the clinical research, and then also working as a clinical research manager in clinical trial operations. So I've had a wide scope of experience, and that experience from managing clinical trials really was the moment that I really had to reckon with myself as a clinical research manager, knowing that I was managing clinical trials, but the patients that were in my trials did not look like me. And so I had the opportunity to work with my manager, who was very supportive in helping to really increase the awareness within our clinical, our team, to looking at the disease and looking at the patients that we were enrolling to ensure that was better aligned. And so it has been rewarding to see now where clinical trial, the diversity and ensuring that clinical research really reflects all patients so that we know that we're bringing the best of medicine that is safe and efficacious for all patients, because we know we're all different and the drugs will respond differently. And so conducting clinical research in a controlled environment and ensuring that we can understand how different patients by race, ethnicity, sex, gender, age are impacted by this drug really is the best way for us to ensure that we have the best of science in this way.
Well, you talked about people who didn't look like you in clinical trials. You seem to have a strong commitment to improving clinical trial recruitment process. What drives your dedication?
Yeah, so, it's very personal. And thinking about my family's medical history, lots of cancers and, comorbidities with diabetes, hypertension. And, it was very heart, breaking to know that there are some options for patients to consider, for their treatment plan. And so my father was being diagnosed for prostate cancer, but because he grew up during the time of some of the medical atrocities and injustices that were happening, he was very distrustful with his healthcare team to ensure that they would do the best for him. And so even though I was a pharmacist and had, really been working in medicine, it was hard to convince him to even just take an MRI so that they could stage the cancer. And with that MRI, it was a trigger for him. for the Tuskegee experiment and bad blood. So I know from my personal experiences and to know that my family would not consider participating in a clinical trial because of the past, was for me, I really want to make sure that people that look like me and that all patients know that there are some opportunities and where they can make the best decision for themselves. And so that is my goal, is really to increase the awareness about clinical trials, increasing the education so that every patient knows where they can find information on clinical trials so that they can make the best choice for them.
So what strategies is Merck implementing to enhance diversity in clinical trials?
Yeah, so that's a very loaded question. When we think about the lack of diversity in clinical trials, it's very complex. That is really going to require not just Merck focusing on this issue and this challenge, but really for our entire, pharmaceutical industry to come together along with patients, along with our policymakers, to really sit at the table and, understand what needs to be done for patients and helping to remove barriers. There's, barriers of access, understanding how can I, the social determinants of health, how can I take off from work to participate in this clinical trial that's supposed to help me, have a greater quality of life in dealing with, your medical challenges. So helping patients remove that, we're working with Greenfire to support patients in providing transportation and helping patients being able to navigate and arrive at the clinical research site. So the rideshare program to provide that transportation is a solution for those patients. We're also doing a lot in communities in educating, increasing clinical trial awareness, working with different vendors that are engaged in communities to support this. We recently partnered with Acclimate, where they're focused on engaging in conversations, building sustainable relationships in communities, and talking about clinical trials without even wanting them to participate in a clinical trial, but helping them to understand what it is, how can they get involved, and to really dismiss some of the myths that we know exist also. So engaging in communities, providing barriers to remove those challenges that prevent patients from participating. We're also working with blackdoctor.org. And again, how can we bring this information closer to patients? And by providing our access to our clinical trials work SharePoint site on their, and making that accessible to their audience. So their audience can access our clinical trials and look to see what trials are available, in addition to providing them articles and educational materials to increase the awareness and education on clinical trials. And one of the other areas that we're focused on is diversifying the clinical trial workforce. We know that, we've heard from patients that when they hear about a clinical trial or approaching, it would be helpful if they could ask someone that looks like them. And so we've really been focused on making these opportunities where clinical research as a career option is made available to community college students and high school students, and offering a program where they can become certified and obtain some training and mentors to begin considering clinical trials as a career option. So it's several different areas that we're continuing to focus on. and really doing a lot of work with our other colleagues in the industry to really bring the best of all of the work that we're doing, sharing those best practices, understanding how we can work together in a collaborative way to really move the needle in, increasing diversity in clinical trials. And, this isn't anything that's new. The lack of diversity has existed for a while, but it does feel different. With the FDA, with the request where we now, all pharma companies do have to prepare a diversity action plan and really identify what the goals are for enrolling a diverse patient population, describing who, based on the epidemiology and the prevalence, who is the patient that is being impacted by the disease, and really having some intentional strategic tactics on how we're going to recruit. Where will the sites be located? Are the diverse patients that we're looking for, are they in those communities? And how are we addressing the barriers that are limiting those patients from participating? So that one document with the diversity action plan is more than just a check the box, but it's really a map for us to use to really help us understand and show how we're going to move the needle and enroll diverse patients.
So how does increased diversity in clinical trial participants improve the outcomes and reliability of research?
So I think, and as we talked a little bit earlier, why it's important when you think about a new drug that is being brought to market, we want to make sure that before it becomes available for all patients, that we've studied and we understand how this drug impacts every patient in a controlled environment. And I can't overemphasize that, where we can make the adjustments if it's a need to lower the dose, or it may even be where that a certain patient population may not need to take it. So it's very critical that we have a diverse patient population in our clinical trials so that we know what we're bringing to the market is safe and efficacious for all patients.
Circling back to Greenfire and Acclimate for a second, to foster diversity in clinical trials, can you discuss their impact so far?
Yes, so with I'll have to say for Acclimate, we just kicked off that partnership, so it's still early, and we'll be able to share some of that feedback. Give us at least about another 9 months as we work with them and partnering. They have worked, and really their success is being a trusted voice in communities, and their relationships in several cities across the US, they've been able to increase the awareness and really going to where the patients are, and which is something that we've heard from patients. We're typically asking them to come to the research site, to come to the institution, but we really need to do a better job of taking clinical research to the patient and to the communities where they live. And so I think that's one of the pluses for Acclimate, is working, engaging with patients right where they are. And that's what we want to do a better job of, meeting patients right where they are. With Greenfire, we do have an enterprise-wide approach where all of our trials, for patients that need transportation, they don't have to worry about that. We've already secured that, so the patients work with their research site to provide those vouchers, or they have the setup for their ride share, and making that available so it's not a barrier that would limit them from participating in clinical trials.
How important is patient education and engagement in improving clinical trial diversity?
It's really at the heart of it all. It's when patients know what is available for them, then they can make the decisions for what's best for them. If you have the opportunity to just even listen to some patients that are looking for a new treatment, you know, and new options for them, understanding and knowing what is available, how do I gain access, where do I go, just the basic information really helps, in leaps and bounds for those patients and moving through and gaining the access that they need. And so what we want to do is really make sure that the education is available. So that's even working alongside, we do have patient navigators that are working in communities. They represent their own community. They look like their community. And being a trusted voice, they are communicating, teaching, and educating in their communities about clinical trials, the basic, and even for letting them know where, if they were looking for a clinical trial, where can they go in their community? So education is key. Just as clinical trials are at the heart of how we bring new medicines to the market, we have to make sure that patients know what is available for them.
Dr. Allen, can patients sign themselves up for clinical trials? Or does that not still go through their provider?
So patients have to work with a principal investigator that has already been enlisted, selected to participate in a clinical trial. So with the aspects of they have to meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria in order to participate. So where we have the challenge is having enough diverse patients raising their hands to say, I will participate. I am interested in participating in a clinical trial. And there has been, issues of unconscious bias where patients just simply have not, diverse patients simply just have not been asked to participate. And research has shown that diverse patients, when asked, have a high percent of interest of participating in a clinical trial. So we have to do a better job of ensuring that all patients are asked to participate in a clinical trial so that they too can have access to these new drugs. So the patient cannot participate on their own. They do have to work with a clinical research investigator to review their medical history to ensure that they meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria to participate. And again, that starts with them being asked.
In your estimation, what steps does the pharmaceutical industry need to take to further improve diversity in clinical trials?
So I think we still, again, I think we can do a better job with some of the basics, the educational piece. We all shouldn't have to create these same materials because the education is the same, and perhaps unifying on some of these parameters for the education and even the awareness can help us all move forward, even from the educational standpoint of leveraging a resource that's just made available for all patients. How can we do this instead of by protocol, but really on a broader, more national scope of having a campaign where we're all unified and talking about how can we increase clinical trial awareness when you have all of us walking together and talking the talk and walking the walk for the same goals. So I think that is really going to be foundational for us to see a bigger shift in how we do this because it's going to take the masses. In addition, I think, we focus a lot on the industry on how we can, make this happen. But we really do need support from our policymakers. And especially when we talk about oncology and, just the inequities in healthcare, there needs to be some adjustments to support patients in being able to get over some of those hurdles that the pharma company really cannot address alone. So again, all of this is really going to require all of us working together to solve this solution together.
Dr. Adrelia Allen, thank you so much for your time today and for your commitment to addressing diversity in medicine.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for helping us to move this message along.